Hello, everybody. Dr. F. Scott Field here, and I'd like to introduce you to our newest sponsor. The NPTE Final Frontier is the review course that I wish was around when I took the board exam. For those of you who know my story, it took me a handful of times to pass that exam, and quite frankly, I really wish I had an exam review course around, just like the NPTE Final Frontier. Check out their website, npteff.com, and use the code HET at checkout for 10% off to all of our listeners and fans. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Healthcare Education Transformation Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. F. Scott Field. I've got with me a great guest today that's going to break down a little bit of a program that he went through. It's an interesting program on a fellowship, actually, in higher education leadership. So I'm excited and pleased to bring on our guest, Dr. Toran MacLeod. Toran, tell us a little bit about your educational journey and how it's kind of led you to where you're at today.
Yeah, well, so first, thanks for having me. It's nice to get to meet you, and we've been following each other for a while, so it's nice to sit down and have a chat. That's a tough question. I think about that question's kind of a tough one. I get that question pretty frequently with like new students and folks wanting to get into physical therapy, and my journey is not normal. So I would say that it's pretty normal for people to say that, but my journey really wasn't normal. Is that a lot of people will say, oh, I kind of took a varied route to get into PT school, or there are many who in my cohorts of students that kind of went straight to PT school. They're 20 years old, they're not yet 21, and they're entering a PT class. So there are certainly those folks that I think take up, the majority of the individuals in my PT class. But I don't know that I was non-traditional, but I was very passionate about education, I'll say. So I did an undergrad degree in kinesiology, and then I went to I did chemistry as well as kinesiology and pre-athletic training, and then I did nuclear chemistry. And got into Department of Defense, Department of Energy, sort of radiochemistry stuff that took me into medical school. And I went to medical school and did a year of that, and really learned that I should not be a physician. And so I left medical school with a bunch of debt. So I took a desk job, did that for couple of years, paid off the med school debt, lived in Italy. It was great. Oh, you should go. And then, really, again, realized that education is my jam. So I was really looking across California for a semester-based program because I'm just the quarter system's too fast for me. So I went to Sac State, and where I am now. I did really exercise physiology, but I was really interested in biomechanics. It was something that was available in undergrad, but I didn't do. And my background in school is really math and physics. So I really love biomechanics. I love human anatomy. That was always my thing. So I did a master's in exercise physiology, but I was really doing motor control biomechanics. And that I started running a biomechanics lab. And so the faculty in the PT department said, hey, why don't you help us out with some research? And that, I hadn't really thought about physical therapy at that point, but it made a lot of sense to kind of get back into the medical field. And it was just such an easy transition from biomechanics. And in comparison to medical school, it was pretty straightforward. So did the PT program at Sac State. And then I recognized how we were just talking about this before we started recording, but the professor's life's pretty good. So I recognized that, yeah, I could do that. That seems like, from doing construction and such to pay for undergrad, some pretty physical manual labor. This is better than crawling under a house for the whole day, or framing houses. So yeah, I can be a professor. And And so I went to do a PhD. I recognized that that was really pretty important to getting a job. So my interest there was in again motor control, and I'm a runner, so the knee joint was really interested to me, and I played soccer growing up, so I was really looking for the best at that point, and I looked at University of Delaware and a couple of places like internationally, but University of Delaware kept on coming back as really like the best place on the planet to do what I wanted to do. And so, I went and got very lucky. Actually, I interviewed, I think, 3 people there for a PhD spot. I flew back, my own dime, and just went and sort of checked it out, and really studied with the best people on the planet for the questions that I had, which I just fell deeper and deeper into the sort of Alice in Wonderland rabbit hole as I got into it, which is what you do in a PhD. So I studied with Lynn Snyder Mackler and Tom Buchanan, and it was just the most positive, difficult experience you can imagine. Like a PhD is not easy. You always lose something dear to you. It is very painful, but it was just a wonderful experience. And then I did a postdoc in radiology. I came back to UCSF and did quantitative imaging, got NIH funding, and like sort of journeyed in that direction before returning to Sac State as a faculty member, and just have continued down the sort of faculty route.
Yeah, I mean, I thought my journey was weird going from English major to physical therapist, but yeah, you definitely got me beat, man. That's a heck of a journey, but I love hearing it. We love those stories, man. That's like, it just goes to show, like, you can take any route to get there. It really doesn't matter. I think one of the issues that we kind of have these days is that we're probably going to be lacking in a lot of terminal degrees in the next couple of years as some of the best in the business start retiring, right? So I don't know. We're going to have to figure that out in the physical therapy realm of what we're going to do to kind of encourage more people to pursue a terminal degree. It's, like you said, not easy. It's a labor of love for sure. You really got to be passionate about it and love it. Otherwise, it's going to be grueling. So, but that's a whole nother rabbit hole that we can get down another day. I want to talk today a little bit about this program that you just recently finished up, the Fellowship in Higher Education Leadership. Tell us about that, the APTA's fellowship. That's something that we haven't talked about, and I just want to hear what it was like.
So I I guess I'm pretty driven as you are when you're doing PT school, really, or going into the PhD route. And so I I've been doing the faculty thing now for about 10 years, and I thought, what's the sort of next progression? And in my department, it is the role of department chair is one that is either like loathed, like nobody wants to do, or which is pretty common actually in many departments, but also it's one that there's some preparation, like you don't want to sort of stumble into that. But I actually was really interested in becoming department chair, and I think just the progression into a leadership role, and also the sort of visionary component is something that is more my speed. My brain typically lives like in the 25 to 50 year out, from where we're at. So I went to my department chair and said, what sort of things do you wish you had done, or had you done to prepare for becoming department chair? Just thinking about succession and, best preparation for that. The fellowship was one thing. Becoming a CAPTA reviewer was another thing. I think that was the main 2 things. Oh, and then just getting on a couple of the committees, the department committees. So actually, the becoming a CAPTA reviewer, that was tricky. That was a harder thing to achieve. It was kind of like winning the lottery. So I finally did that. But the fellowship is just a bunch of work. The purpose of the APTA, it used to be called Eli Education Leadership Institute, and now it's the Fellowship in Higher Education Leadership. It's through the APTA and the APTA education, and so in combination, they put on this about a year long fellowship. And that cohort has kind of grown a little bit. So there might be 20 to 30 people per annual cohort, and it's really to train leaders. That's most commonly department chairs, but it is also, and that can PTA, PT, but it also is directors of clinical education. So your DCEs, your residency directors, in how to navigate the sort of university realm in leadership. So you're managing up, managing your group, how to navigate students, a budget, how to just become a better leader. And what's so interesting is you start into this role and realize in the first module is really recognizing that you're already a leader. You just sort of need to polish a lot of those things. So it's fantastic. So I'd love to talk about it.
Yeah, man. Let's go through the process. So talk us a little bit through the application and then the layout, and then like you said, about a year's worth of a program. Walk us through what that looked like for you.
Yeah, so the application is, you need some letters of recommendation. I don't remember the cost exactly, but it usually requires sponsorship from your university. There were a few people that paid out of pocket for it. Kudos to them. But many people actually in the program are doing it as part of their hiring process. So it was their job was, I don't want to say contingent, but it was based on doing the fellowship as they had just become department chairs. So I was one of the few individuals that actually wasn't already a department chair. Most people were either had been a department chair and recognized they needed or they wanted additional training, or it was part of their hire. And so there's the application. The university, is responsible for the costs that include books, the fellowship itself, and then travel. So travel is generally, now I did it during, part of it I did was during COVID. A big portion of it that isn't always virtual was virtual. But typically you meet 3 times in person. And one of those is at ELC, one's at CSM. And so we did part of that. And then there's graduation. And graduation is a whole, it's at APTA headquarters, and that's a whole workshop, 2-day workshop in itself. And then there's the graduation at the end. The application is a big, actually I learned a lot just in the application process of the thought process around leadership, and then you come up with a project. So you design something that would benefit your university and department, as well as something that really you work on throughout the year under the guidance of usually 2 mentors that are assigned. There's color groups, so four color groups that the cohort is split into, and you have these 2 mentors that sort of guide you, and they meet with you monthly to talk about what's going on in the module, what's going on with you as a leader, and also your project, any questions that come up. And then there are these sort of 3, is really kind of 4 trimesters, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but there's these modules that are broken down into 3 sections within each of those, and they're clustered around topics. So leadership is the first one I mentioned, and so you have these experts that come in and guide your readings, your homework, and your thought process around your development in that content. and then also, before I forget, you have an institutional mentor. So you have somebody within your university that is usually like kind of towards the top. So I had a vice provost as my institutional mentor, and I met with them almost weekly, um, for like an hour each time, and that gets into like your sort of, so for instance, like human resources, maybe at your university is the typical person that you interact with for hiring and firing and any sort of job related questions. But that's not true at my department, in my university. In my university, it's the Office of Faculty Advancement. So our human resources does very little actually with kind of the normal human resources component. So my institutional mentor was able to sort of help me navigate that process and just how to communicate with specific individuals. And then sort of down to the minutia, the reading is heavy. So there are some sections that were, like 5 to 10 hours a week, but there were others that were more like 20 to 40 hours a week. So lots of reading.
Yeah, that's a full-time job in itself there, man.
Yeah. So I created like a Amazon book list. This was one of the hats that I wore just for the collective, the whole cohort, where anytime a book would get mentioned, oh, you should read this, or something on the reading list within the homework or the sort of the module pamphlets that come out, I would add that to this Amazon book list. And thankfully, many of them were on audiobooks. So I was able to do them, while exercising or doing something else. And but like the legal affairs section was tremendous, the amount of reading. So I think if you're interested in taking the fellowship and you're doing this in the future, my advice to you would be that to consider the readings really a repository of information, that if you're really into a particular section, like, how about it? Read that stuff. But at the same time, like, that's a book list for you to use when you need it. Having read all of those legal documents, I can't keep all that in my head. Yeah. And now I'm realizing that, like reading the things that were really crucial at the moment was the point. And then being able to sort of like, I guess, read them, skim them to the point that you know what's in there. And then later on, you can recall through your notes, oh, I have this resource to depend on as in this new leadership role.
Gotcha. So, all right, we've broken down how to get in, who it's for, and what the process looks like, getting through it. Tell us a little bit about your experience and what you took from it. What were like some of the highlights that you left with after you finished this fellowship?
Yeah, I mean, from my experience, but also everybody that I've spoken with, it's about the connections, and that's so common, with what we do. And so there are 30 people now, and actually we created like a larger group. This all the graduates, the connections, and even still, actually, people that I meet that I see like in their signature, or they mention that they're a fellowship graduate. Oh, wow. Yeah, me too. And all of a sudden there's this bond, so being able to speak with another individual, like we have semi-regular meetings, and just to talk to them and say, this is what's going on with me. There's already a framework, like a literal framework for a discussion. We have a very clear and systematic way to discuss how to navigate whatever issues come up. And there are always issues, so just being able to talk about those things with other people that not only have the framework, but have the experience and likely have, pretty sound advice.
Yeah, I can't tell you enough how many times I've said to my students, your network is your net worth. And it's a cliche phrase, but it's true, because again, when they come in on orientation day, I say, hey, you should have been networking already, but the second best time to start networking, if you haven't, is today, right? And I can't remember going, as far back as 10, 15 years worth of practice where I've had to actually physically apply for a job, like with a resume. They've all come through my network. They've all come through referrals or just, talking with people within my network. Or somebody says, hey, there's this position. You'd be great for it. Check it out. I'll put in a word for you, right? Like having that network to fall back on for whatever it may be for however long, you never know, right? But it's just having those people to go to. And luckily the podcast has been great for that. It's expanded my network tenfold. So I don't know everything. I don't claim to, I don't want to, but at least I know who to get you to find the answer if I don't know it. So I think that, like you said, is key to be able to lean on these people and talk to them already having gone through the same thing. And like you said, having that framework to be able to pull from and say, hey, this is what's going on. How have you dealt with it? What have you seen? It's nice to have that safety blanket to fall back on. I think it's a super important takeaway. So that's awesome. I love hearing that. Well, Toran, it's been a great experience talking with you, man. I really love learning about this stuff. I hope our audience, took something from it. We like to ask all of our guests this one final question. And that question is, if you could change one aspect of higher education, whether it be DPT or otherwise, what aspect would you change? Why would you change it? And how would you change it?
Yeah, well, I'm passionate about access. Part of that is affordability, but also just the ease of education. So really how I try to model my content is very, very maximizing throughput. So individuals can essentially take my classes before they come to PT school. So things like Khan Academy are really exciting to me, where you can get up to a full undergraduate degree in many areas for free. What you don't have access to is my tests, my exams, my feedback and structure. But what I tell students when they come to my classroom is that I'm really just speeding up the process of learning. You can learn to do all sorts of things with YouTube or the internet or books. The problem is that it's not always a straight route. Is that sometimes you'll learn something that's wrong, and it's so hard to unlearn that and then come back and get back on the fast track. Or it's just slow, like you're stumbling over something, and just a really simple fix or cue could help an individual just really jump over that and not sort of have issues with whatever they're stumbling on. I'm hopeful that in the future, education, just like historically, just teaching people to read was a real way to keep people out of power. Today, I'm hopeful that we can continue to push forward on that and make education a lot more accessible, especially going into the future. You mentioned the terminal degrees. As the rates of applications for undergraduate degrees are really decreasing, and in particular in underrepresented minorities, it's to go backwards is really disappointing. So I'm hopeful that we can make education essentially free, particularly for those individuals that can't afford it. And to make it very, very accessible for all individuals. That's what I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful, in general for that. I think one area that I'm really interested in is we work as physical therapists, in particular in our field, with individuals that have physical disabilities. And I think it's interesting. I'm disappointed that we have such poor representation of individuals with physical disabilities as clinicians in physical therapy, and that's an area I'm hopeful that we can fix in the future. The evidence is clear that if you're in a teaching position, especially as a clinician, as we're all PT educators. that the clients or the students do better. They have better outcomes either in their education or in their clinical outcomes with if they're reflected in the person that's providing the service. If we're working with people with physical disabilities, we should be having had that experience as well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Shout out to Dr. Scott Love at University of St. Augustine down in Florida there, amputee teaching the prosthetics, orthotics, and amputation course. So definitely, I get where you're coming from on that. We need better representation across the board. And then that trickles down eventually into our physical therapists who then go out and treat patients who are better represented, right? They're seeing somebody who's just like them. And now they're like, hey, this is my people. This is who I want to be treated by. This is awesome. So yeah, we need a lot. Yeah. I tell you almost hit the trifecta there on that, right? So better access, right? DEI, cost, and then representation. So you hit them all, man. That's a solid change. Now we got to get to work and figure out how to make it happen. Right. That's the next step. So, Toran, like I said, man, I appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on so much and educating the general audience about the fellowship and all. Where can people find you on social media or whatever if they want to reach out or just kind of catch up with you and see what you're up to these days?
Yeah, on Twitter, I'm at Toran MacLeod or Toran MacLeod, I guess. So that's a good place to find me. There's only one Toran that I know. So Toran. There's not too many. So if you just Google that, you should be able to find me.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll put the links in the show notes so people can find you easily. Thank you so much again for your time, man. It's been a pleasure talking with you.
Nice meeting you.